Hello friends and welcome back to Haas of Props. I recently got turned on to the game Elden Ring, and one of the weapons that stuck out to me the most was the Moonveil Katana. So I decided to design and 3D print my own inspired by the one used in the game. It's a pretty standard 3D print with a support running the whole way through it, but on this project I switched up the paint techniques a little bit on the gemstones and the handle. So on the gemstones, to give it more of a jewel effect, I use a combination of acrylic paints and fingernail polish. Yes, fingernail polish, and I'll explain why when I get into the actual build. And on the hilt, what I ended up doing was layering thin layers of paint in order to build up depth in the paint job in order to achieve an effect that looks like silk or satin that's wrapped around the handle, typically like what you would have with a standard katana. So when it is assembled, it is actually quite a long katana. From the tip of the blade to the end of the pommel, it is about 5 feet long. And this was done on purpose. I tried to keep the proportions to what they were in the game, and by doing so you end up with this very large katana, which is actually really cool to yield around. So let's get started. So I was visiting friends over the Christmas break, and they turned me on to Elden Ring. I'd heard other people mention the game before, but I never had the opportunity to play it until now. I didn't make it to the point where I could get Moonveil, but my friend had, and I thought it was pretty cool, and the more I saw it being used in the game, the more I wanted to make it. Now, I can't create the lightning and energy effects, but the colors of these elements will be incorporated into the final design. So I tried to keep the design and assembly relatively simple. The grip is only 2 pieces, the handguard is its own piece, and the blade is made of 5. And then once everything was designed, it could easily be printed. The blade is designed so a support can run through the blade and through the handguard into the hilt, and a piece of support can be used to secure the 2 hilt pieces together. But before assembling, we need to smooth away the print lines so the blade will be super smooth and resemble metal when we're finished. To do this, begin with some 120 grit sandpaper and sand all the pieces. Oops, mine left behind some residue from another project, but it shouldn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Once you've finished with the 120, switch to a 400 grit. This will begin to really smooth away the print lines and leave you with a clean finish. While I do that, I would really appreciate it if you would click the subscribe button if you haven't already, and if you click the notification bell, you will be notified when a new project releases. Thank you. It's hard to see with white prints, but the surface is becoming really smooth. We are on our way to making the blade look like metal. When all the pieces have reached this point of sanding, assembly can happen. To start, I take some E6000 and squeeze some into the tip of the blade piece. Then I insert a 3/16 inch diameter dowel that measures about 45 inches in length into the piece. I'm using a wooden dowel, but you could use a steel rod if you have one available. Then I slide the next piece onto the dowel, but before allowing the 2 pieces to touch, I squeeze some of the E6000 onto the dowel. This way it will roll into the inside of the printed piece when I push them together. Now, to secure the pieces to each other, I use some CA glue, or basically super glue. Then the pieces can be pressed together and aligned. Once I have them in place, I like to use some zip kicker. This will cause the CA glue to cure in a matter of seconds, and it helps speed up the build time. Otherwise, I would have to hold it and wait for it to dry. When the blade is assembled, the handguard can be attached to the blade using the same technique as before. This guard consists of several circles, and when assembling, you want to make sure that the open circles aim down like the blade edge, and the crescent shape of stones aims up. Then a hilt piece can be added to the end of the dowel in exactly the same manner, and the curve of the hilt will follow the same curve of the blade, so the whole sword will look continuous. Then the second hilt piece can be attached to the first using a small piece of the dowel or rod. With the assembly now complete, we can seal up the seams between the pieces. To do that, I'm using this trusty glazing and spot putty from Bondo that I use all the time, and it works great. To apply, I just squeeze it onto the seams with a palette knife, making sure to press it into the seam as much as I can. Once that is dry, I use my hand sander with a 220 grit pad to smooth off the areas where the putty is. If you don't have a sander, that's no big deal, you can easily do it by hand. With the seams filled and sanded, we can begin to really create a smooth surface. The first step is to take some of the Bondo putty and thin it with some acetone. Then this can be brushed onto the entire sword's surface. What this does is it helps fill in any areas where the print lines might still be visible or not sanded completely. You could also do this step with an old airbrush if you want. When it is dry, take some 400 grit sandpaper and smooth the surface. You don't want to remove it all, just enough so you create a surface smooth to the touch. Some of the print may show through, but that's completely fine. Once sanded, I coated the entire katana with some 2-in-1 filler and sandable primer. This will just add some extra filler to spots and really help us get a glass-like smooth finish. I apply 2 thin, even coats and let the first dry before applying the second. When it's dry, you can see how it is already really smooth, but it's not yet smooth enough. Next, take the 400 grit sandpaper and sand the primer. Next, we are going to wet sand the katana. To do this, I use a soft bristle brush and brush on a thin layer of water. Then I take some 1000 grit sandpaper and sand over the wet area. This is the step that will really polish up the surface and give us that glass-like finish. Once that's finished, wipe the sword down with a soft cloth to remove any residue. And now we can begin the painting process. I started with some gloss black spray paint. The whole sword doesn't need sprayed, just the areas that would be metal, like the blade, the handguard, and the pommel. We don't need to worry about the hilt. I applied 3 thin layers to get even coverage and to make sure it was super shiny. Then these areas can be sprayed with a metallic silver. The glossy black base will cause the silver to really pop and be really shiny. 2 coats of silver should do it. After the silver has dried, we can start the detail painting. To begin painting the gemstones, I'm going to use some metallic blue sapphire nail polish. I know what you're thinking, what the hell? But I wanted some jewel tones and I couldn't find a blue that I really liked, so I opted out for this, and a bonus is it has a hardener in it, so it will help create a protective shell on the surface. To apply, I just used the supplied brush and dabbed the polish in spots along the gemstone edges. While the nail polish is still wet, I'm going to add some of this metallic amethyst. I use a soft bristle brush and dab the paint in and around the polish and even blend the two into each other in spots. Next, I use some of this metallic pewter and apply it the same way as the amethyst. I try to focus on any spots where silver might still be showing through. Once all the paint and polish were dry, I then coated the gemstones with some nail polish top coat. This will seal and protect the paint, and since it's a gel, the thickness will add depth to the paint underneath. Now for the hilt. To make it look like it's wrapped with satin or silk like you would get with a traditional katana, we're going to build up thin layers of paint in order to achieve this desired effect. I begin by basing the handle diamond areas with a mixture of crimson and burnt umber. Now, the hilt wrappings can be based with straight crimson red. Again, these colors are going to just be our base, but you could change up any of the colors for any color combination you would like. While the crimson is still wet, I brush some of the metallic amethyst into it. I don't want it to completely blend together. Instead, some blended spots and some spots that are either amethyst or crimson is totally desirable. Next, I take some royal blue and brush a thin layer onto the crimson and umber layer. Keeping this layer thin will allow the two layers to work together to create a purplish color slightly different to the amethyst. And a little added to the wrappings just helps add some variation. When the layers have dried, I brush some of the metallic pewter onto the wrappings. And some metallic amethyst can go onto the hilt diamonds. It's difficult to tell with my camera lighting, but two distinct colors are beginning to emerge. The last step is to thin some of the royal blue with some water and brush a thin layer onto the straps. And when they dry, the hilt will look something like this. By adding thin layer on thin layer, you build up colors and achieve depth in your paint job. By using the metallics, you achieve a finish very similar to satin or silk, and the colors complement the gemstones on the blade. I chose blues and purples because they're similar to the colors of the energy emitted by the sword in the game, and they remind me of nighttime, and since the name of the sword is Moonveil, I wanted to fully embrace a moon theme, but you can change up the coloring however you would wish. And there you have it, a 5-foot-long Moonveil Katana inspired by the one in the game. Let me know if you've played the game, what you think of it, and what your favorite weapon is that you've used. And plus, if you would like to make one of these for yourself, you can find a link to the pieces in the below description. I hope you enjoyed this build. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, share it with friends and family, subscribe to Haas of Props, and I'll catch you on the next one. And remember, if you are building any of my builds or using any of my templates, feel free and tag me at Haas of Props on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, because I would really like to see your fantastic work. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.